Beloved, there is something so vital to understand when we walk with God, and that is the importance of recognizing His divine intention for our lives. Purpose, purpose, purpose. Purpose shapes us, influences us, and it can either elevate us to live a life of fulfillment or leave us wandering in confusion. Today I want to talk to you about one of the most important revelations Myles Munroe ever shared. The truth that the greatest tragedy in life is not death, but a life lived without purpose. First, listen to the restlessness of your spirit. When God is guiding you, He brings peace. But when there is a lack of peace regarding your direction in life, it often signals a deeper spiritual reality that should not be ignored. Peace, as Paul writes in Galatians 5:22, is one of the fruits of the Spirit, a gift God gives to His children when they are aligned with His will. Peace is not just an emotion, it is a signpost from the Holy Spirit that confirms the rightness of our steps. And when that peace is absent, it is a call to examine whether the path you are walking truly aligns with the purpose God placed in you before the foundation of the world. If you find yourself constantly uneasy, unsettled, or conflicted about where your life is headed, it is wise to pause and seek discernment. This inner restlessness is not simply nerves or indecision. In fact, it is one of the most profound ways the Holy Spirit communicates with us. Proverbs 3:5-6 urges us to trust in the Lord with all our heart and lean not on our own understanding. In that place of trust, God promises to direct our paths. But when we try to rationalize our way through life apart from His direction, we end up forcing ourselves into situations where peace does not dwell. Often this lack of peace manifests as a constant inner turmoil, as if you are living with two minds or torn between two paths. James 1:8 warns us about the danger of being double-minded, unstable in all our ways. When you attempt to hold on to a version of life that God is calling you to release, this inner conflict intensifies. You may feel torn between wanting to follow God's voice and wanting to cling to your own desires. This discord is often God's way of urging you to step back, examine your life, and ask whether you are truly aligned with His calling. This turmoil can appear in different forms: feelings of anxiety, sleepless nights, or even a sense of guilt or frustration that lingers no matter how much you try to suppress it. The closer you draw to God in prayer, the more sensitive you become to anything that disrupts His peace. Philippians 4:7 tells us that the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your heart and your mind in Christ Jesus. If you are struggling with an absence of that peace in your decisions, it may be because your current path is not under God's protection. Another sign that purpose is misaligned is fear. Fear of failure, fear of people's opinions, fear of stepping outside your comfort zone. But 2 Timothy 1-7 reminds us that God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power, of love, and of a sound mind. When fear dominates your choices, it is wise to stop and listen closely. Fear and confusion are not from God, for He brings clarity, courage, and direction. God will never lead you into a path that drains your spirit or keeps you paralyzed. People often ignore these feelings, rationalizing the restlessness as something they can overcome with more effort or more distractions. But God does not intend for His children to walk in self-inflicted confusion. He promises in Isaiah 26:3, "You will keep him in perfect peace whose mind is stayed on you because he trusts in you." This is a reminder that peace comes when we trust His direction, not when we force ourselves into places He has not designed for us. When you pursue a path outside of purpose, your values begin to conflict with your spirit. Your values are rooted in your beliefs, your faith, and the principles you hold as sacred. They shape how you live, how you view your future, and how you respond to life's challenges. But when you walk outside of the assignment God has placed in you, that foundation becomes unstable. Amos 3:3 asks, "Can two walk together unless they are agreed?" This highlights the importance of unity with God and unity with His design for your life. When your core values do not align with your choices, you are inevitably pulled in different directions. This is why Dr. Munroe would often insist that discovering your purpose is non-negotiable, because without purpose, even success feels empty, achievements feel meaningless, and relationships feel unstable. For a believer, faith is not just a part of life, it is the essence of life. And when your direction contradicts your faith, when your steps contradict your values, the result is always disunity, confusion, and disappointment. So, beloved, hear this. Until you uncover your purpose, until you choose to live in agreement with the design God placed in you, you will always sense that inner restlessness. You can try to silence it, but you cannot escape it, because that restlessness is not the absence of peace. It is the voice of destiny calling you home. Beloved, as we continue, let us dive deeper into the truth that conflicting values are one of the clearest signs that your path may not align with God's design. Just as Myles Munroe taught, when two forces pull in opposite directions, tension is inevitable. It is impossible to thrive when your life, your relationships, and your choices are yoked to principles that contradict your divine purpose. The Bible reminds us in 2 Corinthians 6:14, "Do not be unequally yoked with unbelievers. For what fellowship has righteousness with lawlessness? Or what communion has light with darkness?" This is not a warning of judgment, beloved. It is a warning of reality. Values define our priorities, our actions, and ultimately the destiny we are walking toward. If your goals, ambitions, or beliefs clash with those around you, or even with your own attempts to satisfy the expectations of others, you will always feel resistance, frustration, and inner conflict. Munroe would say, "You cannot reach your potential if you are constantly bending to fit a mold that was never meant for you." Every time you compromise on your values, you delay your destiny and invite confusion into your soul. Conflicting values are not always obvious. They can appear in subtle ways. Decisions about how you spend your time, the way you prioritize work versus service, even the company you keep. And over time, these small compromises accumulate, creating a weight that blocks your spiritual vision. Proverbs 16:9 reminds us, "In their hearts humans plan their course, but the Lord establishes their steps." When your steps are yoked to something incompatible with God's plan, progress is hindered, stagnation sets in, and the path to purpose becomes unclear. This principle extends beyond relationships. It applies to business partnerships, friendships, and even personal ambitions. If your endeavors require you to sacrifice your core beliefs or compromise your integrity, then no matter how successful they appear outwardly, inwardly, they will drain you. Munroe often emphasized that alignment with purpose is non-negotiable. Success without purpose is a hollow victory. True fulfillment comes only when your values, your actions, and your vision move together in harmony with God's design. Now let us consider practical signs of conflicting values. Do you feel drained after interactions with certain people or projects? Do you find yourself justifying actions that feel wrong or uncomfortable? Are your decisions motivated more by fear, approval, or obligation than by conviction? These are the subtle yet powerful indicators that your life may be yoked to something not ordained for you. Proverbs 11:14 says, "Where there is no counsel, the people fall. But in the multitude of counselors there is safety." When your path separates you from wise guidance, it is often because the path itself is misaligned. Furthermore, conflicting values lead to repeated patterns of frustration. Just as in relationships where red flags appear again and again, in life decisions these patterns signal deeper issues. Munroe taught that God communicates through patterns, not just events. If you notice the same obstacles, the same arguments, the same disappointments recurring, it is God's way of nudging you to examine whether you are walking in alignment with your purpose. Ignore these patterns and the confusion only grows. Beloved, remember this. God has a blueprint for your life, a unique calling, a distinct purpose, a design that only you can fulfill. When you yoke yourself to values, principles, or paths that contradict that design, peace disappears, frustration multiplies, and your spiritual growth stalls. James 4:3 reminds us, "You ask and do not receive, because you ask with wrong motives." Sometimes the reason doors remain closed, prayers remain unanswered, or peace remains absent is not neglect. It is God protecting you from being misaligned. So take a moment to examine your life. Ask yourself, are my partnerships, my decisions, and my ambitions in harmony with God's purpose for me? If the answer is no, beloved, it is not failure. It is clarity. It is an invitation to realign, to release what is holding you back, and to step fully into the path God designed for you. Munroe would say, "You cannot live someone else's purpose. Your destiny requires courage, focus, and obedience to the call that only you can answer." And as we prepare to continue, remember, when values align with purpose, life flows. When they conflict, life resists. Pay attention to these signs, for they are God's way of guiding you toward the fulfillment, the impact, and the legacy He has planned for you. Peace, joy, and fruitfulness are not coincidences. They are markers that you are walking in alignment with divine intention. Beloved, as we continue, let us now turn our attention to repeated red flags. Just as in relationships, life itself presents us with patterns that are impossible to ignore when we are walking out our God-given purpose. Munroe often emphasized that God communicates with us through repetition. If something shows up again and again, it is not coincidence. It is a divine signal. These repeated warnings are meant to protect you, guide you, and align you with the path that leads to fulfillment. Think about your life. Are there opportunities, partnerships, or projects where the same issues keep arising? Are you repeatedly encountering the same obstacles, disappointments, or frustrations? Beloved, these are not mere accidents. They are the universe, and more specifically God, speaking to your spirit, nudging you to examine whether your current direction is truly in alignment with His purpose. Proverbs 27:12 says, "The prudent see danger and take refuge, but the simple keep going and suffer for it." Repeated red flags are God's way of urging prudence. They are not punishment, they are protection. Red flags in life appear in many forms: lack of integrity in those you trust, repeated betrayal, manipulation or dishonesty, patterns of wasted time or energy, opportunities that drain rather than build you up, recurring failures that leave you questioning your abilities. Munroe taught that these are markers, signposts telling you to stop, evaluate, and redirect. Ignoring them keeps you trapped in cycles that prevent you from stepping fully into your calling. Beloved, let us not forget that trust is foundational, not only in relationships, but also in every area of life. Your work, your partnerships, and your spiritual pursuits. Repeated patterns of dishonesty, unreliability, or instability in people or projects you invest in are red flags that indicate misalignment with God's design. Trust is essential because without it, you cannot build lasting impact or walk confidently in your purpose. Another sign of misalignment is manipulation, not only by people, but also by circumstances that repeatedly try to steer you off course. When projects, commitments, or relationships constantly pull you away from your God-given mission, when your energy is sapped and your vision blurred, these are warnings. Galatians 5:1 reminds us, "It is for freedom that Christ has set us free." A life of purpose cannot flourish under constant control or coercion. Repeated manipulation, whether external or internal, is a red flag demanding discernment. Anger, volatility, or recurring conflict is another marker. When environments or people provoke repeated frustration, tension, or discouragement, it creates a climate that blocks vision and growth. James 1:20 says, "The anger of man does not produce the righteousness of God." Repeated disruption signals that the path you are on or the people you are yoked with may not be aligned with the divine flow of purpose. Munroe taught that life aligned with God's calling is challenging but also nurturing. Consistent harm or discouragement is a clear indicator that correction is needed. And finally, toxic patterns such as jealousy, competition, or envy, whether in relationships, workplaces, or communities, serve as repeated red flags. They are signs that the environment is not designed for growth, not conducive to fruitfulness, and not meant to nurture your calling. 1 Corinthians 13:4-5 reminds us, "Love is patient, love is kind. It does not envy, it does not boast, it is not proud." When patterns repeatedly contradict the principles of love, integrity, and God-centered purpose, it is a sign that realignment is necessary. Beloved, repeated red flags are not meant to limit you, they are meant to save you. They reveal truth that is often invisible in the moment. They protect your spirit, your calling, and your destiny. If you continue to ignore these signals, you risk being stuck in cycles that prevent you from living fully in the purpose God designed for you. Munroe would say, "When God shows you the warning signs, obey them. Wisdom lies in listening before harm comes." So take stock today. What patterns are repeating in your life? Are there consistent obstacles, frustrations, or discouragements that point to misalignment? Are you investing in people, projects, or paths that constantly sap your energy, peace, or focus? God is speaking through these patterns, beloved. He is calling you to discern, to release, and to redirect toward alignment with His purpose. Beloved, as we move forward, let us now reflect on stagnation, the subtle yet powerful sign that something in your life may not be aligned with God's purpose. Munroe often emphasized that God designed our lives for growth, advancement, and fruitfulness. When we find ourselves stuck repeating the same mistakes or unable to move forward despite effort, it is a signal from the Spirit to examine our path. Stagnation is not random, it is a warning that the flow of destiny is being blocked. Think about your own life. Do you feel like your dreams are delayed, your goals are stalled, or your vision is fading? Are you pouring energy into people, projects, or paths that yield little fruit? Proverbs 4:23 reminds us, above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. Stagnation often begins in the heart. It affects your motivation, creativity, and spiritual focus. It drains your energy and dims the light of purpose God has placed within you. Stagnation can show up in many ways. It may appear as repeated failures despite your best efforts, opportunities that seem to vanish just when you are about to succeed, or constant distraction and conflict that pull you away from your calling. Munroe would say, "A life out of alignment with purpose is a life of endless effort with little reward." When you are yoked to values, people, or projects that contradict your destiny, progress slows, and even your achievements feel hollow. Beloved, consider this. Stagnation is not just lack of progress. It is a spiritual signal, a divine alarm that warns you something is misaligned. It may be your environment, your relationships, or even your own choices that are holding you back. God designed relationships, opportunities, and assignments to be channels of growth. When they instead create setbacks or frustration, it is His way of asking you to pause and reassess. One of the most subtle forms of stagnation is the gradual spiritual drift. The people we are closest to have an enormous influence on our priorities, behaviors, and values. If your environment does not encourage growth in faith, character, or purpose, your spiritual foundation slowly erodes. 1 Corinthians 15:33 reminds us, "Do not be deceived. Bad company corrupts good morals." Stagnation is often the result of repeated exposure to influences that subtly pull you away from God's design for your life. Beloved, stagnation also affects your personal mission. When your life is misaligned, your calling, creativity, and ambition can be sidelined. Instead of advancing toward the vision God placed in your heart, you expend energy managing obstacles, emotional conflict, or unproductive responsibilities. Your divine assignments are postponed, delayed, or even abandoned, leaving a sense of frustration and unfulfillment. Myles Munroe would say, "Your purpose demands forward motion. If you are standing still, something is wrong." A life of purpose is never stagnant. It flows, it grows, it produces fruit. When progress is blocked, it is time to look carefully at what or who is responsible. It may be a relationship, a partnership, or even an internal mindset that is contrary to God's plan. Stagnation is always a sign that realignment is required. Finally, beloved, understand that God does not intend for His children to remain stuck. He designed your life for advancement, fruitfulness, and impact. If a path, project, or relationship keeps you from growing, it is not His design. Psalm 37:23 reminds us, "The steps of a man are established by the Lord, and He delights in His way." When your steps are misaligned, you will feel the drag, the resistance, and the repeated setbacks. This is God inviting you to reassess, realign, and step forward in obedience. So today, examine your life for areas of stagnation. Ask yourself, am I advancing toward the purpose God has placed in my heart? Are there recurring obstacles, frustrations, or distractions that block my growth? Are my relationships, projects, or commitments building me up or holding me back? Beloved, stagnation is a signal, a call to courage, reflection, and decisive action. It is a moment to release what no longer aligns and pursue fully the path God has designed for you. Beloved, as we move deeper into understanding God's guidance, let us now reflect on unanswered prayers and divine redirection. Many of us pray earnestly, seeking clarity, change, or breakthrough in our lives, yet the answers do not come as we expect. Myles Munroe often taught that God's silence is not neglect, it is direction. It is His way of saying, hold on, pause, and consider the path you are on. When your prayers seem unanswered, it may be because the situation, relationship, or opportunity you are seeking to change is not aligned with your divine purpose. Proverbs 3:5-6 reminds us, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to Him, and He will make your path straight." When God does not act immediately, it is not a denial but an invitation to submit your desires fully to His wisdom. Beloved, have you noticed that sometimes we ask for change repeatedly, yet nothing shifts? Perhaps you pray for growth in a partnership, improvement in a project, or alignment in a relationship, but the same patterns persist. This is not a failure of God's power, nor is it a sign that He is unaware. Rather, it is a divine signal that the path itself may not be designed for you. Munroe emphasized that God's purpose always takes priority over temporary comfort. Unanswered prayers are often God's way of protecting us from misalignment, disappointment, or spiritual harm. James 4:3 reminds us, "You ask and do not receive because you ask with wrong motives." Beloved, sometimes our desires, although well-intentioned, do not align with God's greater plan for our life. Our prayers may focus on changing circumstances or people rather than seeking His direction. In these moments, His silence is an act of love, guiding us to surrender control and trust in His timing and wisdom. Think about this. When God does not answer, He is inviting discernment. He is asking, is this the path that will lead you to your calling? Are you aligned with the destiny I have prepared for you? Munroe would say, purpose is never served by forcing change. It is realized through alignment with God's design. Unanswered prayers are a mirror. They reveal whether we are pursuing what truly belongs to us or holding on to what must be released. Beloved, divine redirection through unanswered prayers is not a rejection, it is a preparation. Psalm 84:11 assures us that the Lord will withhold no good thing from those who walk uprightly. When answers are delayed, God is carefully orchestrating the conditions for your breakthrough, ensuring that when doors open, they lead to the right place, the right people, and the right purpose. Munroe emphasized that timing is critical. God's alignment always produces the maximum impact. This principle extends beyond personal desires to relationships, work, and spiritual assignments. If you pray for change in someone else or in a circumstance and nothing shifts, it may be God signaling that it is time to release, step back, and allow His direction to lead. Holding on in defiance of His guidance often results in frustration, wasted energy, and stagnation. Beloved, consider unanswered prayers as signposts, as markers pointing you toward alignment with your true calling. They invite patience, reflection, and obedience. They challenge you to trust in His greater plan, even when immediate results are unseen. Romans 8:28 reminds us, and we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love Him, who have been called according to His purpose. Every delay, every silence is a part of the divine orchestration toward good. So today, take a moment to reflect. Are there areas of your life where you have prayed earnestly yet received no response? Are these unanswered prayers guiding you to release what is misaligned and step fully into what God has prepared for you? Beloved, trust the silence, trust the redirection, and trust the process. Munroe would say, alignment with purpose always produces peace, clarity, and fruitfulness. Anything less is not the path God intends for you. Unanswered prayers are not signs of absence. They are invitations to discernment, trust, and obedience. God is always working, always directing, always guiding toward your destiny. Your task is to listen, align, and walk faithfully, knowing that every pause, every delay, and every silence is carefully designed to bring you to your highest calling. Beloved, as we continue, let us now reflect on isolation. In our pursuit of purpose, the people and environments around us play a vital role in shaping our destiny. Myles Munroe often emphasized that no one achieves their calling alone. God designed us for community, for counsel, for mentorship, and for the encouragement that comes from wise and godly relationships. Proverbs 11:14 says, "Where there is no counsel, the people fall, but in the multitude of counselors there is safety." Isolation is a warning when it cuts you off from the wisdom and guidance God intends for your life. Have you noticed, beloved, that sometimes the pursuit of your calling is met with discouragement or distance from those who love and support you? Perhaps people who once offered guidance, encouragement, or perspective are now distant, or perhaps the environments you are in subtly undermine your growth. Munroe taught that purpose requires alignment not only with God, but also with the right people who reinforce your vision, not diminish it. When isolation creeps in, it is often a signal that something in your associations is misaligned with your destiny. Isolation can be subtle at first, appearing as just needing more time with a person, a project, or a pursuit. Yet over time, it can become a spiritual and emotional barrier, limiting your ability to hear God clearly, discern truth, and receive counsel. Ecclesiastes 4:9-10 reminds us, "Two are better than one, because they have a good return for their labor. If either of them falls, one can help the other up." God never intended for you to walk your purpose alone. When isolation occurs, it is a red flag, signaling that your current path or partnerships may be keeping you from the fullness of life He intends. Beloved, pay attention to subtle forms of isolation. Do certain associations, commitments, or responsibilities make it harder for you to connect with mentors, advisors, or spiritually mature friends? Are you discouraged from seeking guidance or being around those who can challenge and inspire your growth? These are not coincidences. God uses these warnings to protect your influence, your vision, and your spiritual progress. Munroe would say, the people around you either pull you forward toward your destiny or they hold you back. Discern wisely. Isolation also impacts clarity and decision making. When you are cut off from wise counsel, your perspective narrows and you are more vulnerable to deception, doubt, and misdirection. Proverbs 15:22 reminds us, without counsel, plans fail, but with many advisors, they succeed. Your purpose requires the input, encouragement, and accountability of godly people. When isolation interrupts these connections, it is a signal to evaluate your relationships, your environment, and your priorities. Furthermore, isolation can subtly weaken your spiritual life. When you distance yourself from those who encourage prayer, study, and faithful living, your own commitment can erode over time. Hebrews 10:24-25 encourages us to consider how we may spur one another on toward love and good deeds, not giving up meeting together, as some are in the habit of doing, but encouraging one another. Your growth is intertwined with community. When isolation increases, the Spirit often uses it as a warning to redirect, reconnect, or release what hinders your advancement. Beloved, recognize that isolation is never from God when it is caused by people or environments that oppose your purpose. It is a signal to reassess, to release, and to realign. Munroe would teach that your calling is too important to be stifled by discouragement, negative influence, or separation from wise counsel. God places people, mentors, and communities around you to amplify your vision, not limit it. So today, reflect. Are you experiencing isolation that limits your growth, clarity, or alignment with God's purpose? Are your current associations uplifting your calling or holding you back? Beloved, listen carefully. God uses these signs to protect your destiny, to preserve your vision, and to ensure you remain on the path of fruitfulness. Seek connection with the right people, embrace wise counsel, and release what isolates you from the guidance and support God has provided. Purpose flourishes in community, not in solitude.